Tom Wood is a well-known expert on coins. Fortunately, he lives right near us here, over in Harrisburg, North Carolina area. He is a graduate of Rochester University. He was there on a full ride naval scholarship, much to the pleasure of his father and mother.
Became Marine Corps, though, instead of Navy, just to set the record straight.
Okay. And he lives with his wife, Luann, who's here with us today, Luann. And they have 4 children who have left the nest and are productively involved in life. And 2 grandsons, I believe.
2 grandsons?
2 grandsons. So Tom spends his days and probably many, many nights as is it correct if I say sales engineering manager for Boulder?
Sure.
Is there a title that I should have there?
I'm an engineering product specialist, and I support the sales staff globally for different product lines.
He knows a lot about motors, and he's damn good.
So I have fun with it.
Okay. And in his spare time, he and Luann, of course, have done a lot of church work, working with youth groups and what have you. And but I think you got started with the coins.
I'll actually tell the story.
Oh, you're gonna tell.
I'll actually tell it. Yeah, that's not a problem. It's a great softball pitch lead-in, though, so it's great.
Okay,
Good.
all right. Well, I'm going to let you hear what Tom has to say.
Thanks, John. And the nice things he says is because he's my uncle, and it's all in the family. I'm Tom Wood, and my wife, Luann. Thank you. Yeah, I know. So I was in church 24 years ago, and a couple weeks before I had signed up and said, yes, I'd be willing to help. I don't want to volunteer to lead something. I don't want to volunteer to spend a lot of money on something or spend way too much time, but if you need me occasionally, I'll help. And so the woman that was sitting next to me, we all stood up and we introduced each other. Hi, I'm Tom Wood.
Hi, I'm Pat Butt.
Nice to meet you, Pat. And the woman grabbed onto my hand and she said, oh, you're Tom Wood. And I said, yes, I am. Yeah. And her name was Betty Galgosi. And Betty is, more on Betty in a minute. So I'm there, and she still hasn't let go of my hand. And she said, I heard that you're a former Marine. I have an 8th grade youth ministry class that is driving the kids crazy with the 2, let's say, women that were doing the classroom, that were doing the middle school youth ministry program, the same way they had done it back in maybe the 40s and 50s, okay? The kids weren't appreciating it. They weren't getting it, and they were giving these 2 women complete and total hell, okay? These women were ending up at night with tears rolling down their face, and the youth ministry director was saying, we've got to find a way. If we could only get some, adult male figure in the room that would keep them from acting out, it would work out great. So she said, would you come and just sit in the class? And I said, I'd be happy to. And I sat in the class, and by the end of that particular evening, I was throwing spitballs at the 2 older ladies that were trying to run. I was totally, it was so badly done. So I went back to the administrative director of the youth program, and I said, she says, can you help? I'm not going to try and imitate her language. She was an elderly Irish nun that was running this particular program, and I couldn't barely understand her anyway. But I said, yes, I can help. She says, so you're going to come next week? I said, yes, I will. She said, you're going to sit there? What? I say, no, I'm not. I think I would like to help you because the women that are there don't want to do this. And I said, if Betty Galgosi will do it with me, now I'm going to get her into it, I will take the class and I will work with your 8th grade youth ministry program, and I'll try and find a way to create more interesting content. And Betty and I, for 15 years, did youth ministry at that church. Now, I happen to be Protestant. I was raised Episcopalian. My lovely wife is one of 9 kids in what might be called an Irish Catholic family. And so I chose to make sure that we were worshiping as a family, which was more important to me than the particular flavor. And my Christian tradition was not lost on the fact that the Catholics had a little different way of doing things, and there may be Catholics here. I happen to now be Catholic. But the most important thing was that I could take the message of Christ and the message of our Christian faith tradition to people in different ways. And one way I found to try and be challenging with 8th graders, I don't know how many of you've all perhaps encouraged young people, and it's not always easy when there are years and miles that separate us, okay, in terms of our culture and how we deal with things. I was trying to find a way, my wife and I make jewelry, and I was trying to find a way one time to think about how can I reach young children? How can I reach kids and have a tangible way to do that? And so what I found was, I'm out at a gem and mineral place one time, and I find there are these old coins. Are these things real? I said, yeah. I said, well, how old are they? Well, they're from the time of Christ. And all of a sudden, well, there's a thought. And I'll show you a coin in a little while that I used heavily in my youth ministries, whether it was my own church or dozens of other churches around that I've gone to. And I found that by putting context and the reality of physical things that were there at the time of Christ into people's hands, there is a connection that can be made with people, with the ability to suspend their disbelief, perhaps, in the case of children, and in the case of many people that have been exposed to Christian traditions for years. So this was one of the vehicles that I used, and I'd like to share a little bit about ancient coins, and specifically about biblical coins, with all of you today. What I'm going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about the history. We're going to talk a little bit, let me get my little pointer going here. Oh, that's the last one. We're going to talk a little bit about ancient coins in general, how they're made, and a few other things. And then I'm going to put some into your hands. And what I'd like to do is, I'd like the coins, I'll give them to Sam here, with your permission. We'll circulate them around, which is why when there's empty holes, I don't want to have people have to get up and move too far. So the coins will go to the back, and then they'll cross over, and they'll back and end up right up here. I have given coins out, thousands of dollars to coins out to people over probably 20 years of doing this now. And I've never lost a coin. Not that I expect to tonight, but. Now here, when they come back up, if you just want to set them on the floor or on the chair or something, that'll be great, okay? And I'll pick them up later. So, why do we have coins? Why do we use coins? We use coins today because it's easier to have a medium of exchange for people. We don't have to have so many pounds of beef we want to sell. We don't have to have so many ounces of grain we want to trade. We can get what we need by simply giving some real tangible value, maybe. Dollar bills aren't necessarily tangible these days. They're not intrinsic, but masses of gold and silver and bronze in the old days were literally the easiest means of transacting commerce, both between cities, countries, between individuals, and as a result, the three basic metals, gold, silver, and bronze, were what the earliest coinage were made of. And the value of the coin was equal to the intrinsic weight value of the metal itself. So a similar size gold, silver, and bronze coin would have very different buying power. Between the uniformity of the weight and the fineness, meaning 24 karat gold or only 12 karat gold, was the metal cut down in terms of value? There were some cities that created coinage that had extremely high quality silver and gold in their coins. And there were cities that had extremely uniform. They knew if they had 100 different coins in front of them, the relative amount of value for each of those coins would be perfectly the same. And then there were cities that cheated. What city do you want to do business with? What people do you want to do business with? What coins do you want to use when you're transacting business? So cities would compete to have the best quality coins, the best uniformity of the coins, and they were the ones that led commerce in the ancient days. The coins often would have been authorized by either a city or a ruler, and they would put the emblems of these people onto the coins. And you'll see some of that in a little while here. So those portraits and the civic emblems, for example, the city of Tyre had the Club of Hercules. And we'll see that on one of the coins from Tyre in a little while here. So how are these things made? These things are made by literally hand striking masses of small metal. So if I'm just going to circulate, this happens to be a Ptolemaic bronze from the 3rd century BC. And you can see it's a big chunk of bronze, and it literally would have been made, well, they'd put it into there'd be a hand-cut die in the bottom, maybe in an anvil or a stump, and then there'd be a hand-held upper die, and a guy with an arm like this big would be striking all day long. They say that probably as many as 10,000 or more strikes per day. Well, this guy walked around like this. Right, this arm did nothing. But the idea was that right here, the two dies would be in these positions. The blank would be in between them. Once, sometimes even twice, we see evidence of these things being struck. And they knew how to do things like annealing and other metallurgy practices that made the coin hard and maintain the imagery on that coin for an extended period of time. Now they didn't use pure gold or pure silver anyway, because they would have been too soft. So those metals, they knew how to alloy or mix the metal with other metals. In the case of gold, it often was blended with a little bit of copper or bronze. In the case of silver, was often done with a little bit of bronze or copper as well. And then the bronze coins, they had tin added to them. So the tin mines of the ancient world were really important places to keep control of also, because they were used in all of coinage. So let's talk about the relative value of some coins. Some of the coins I'm going to hand out later here, little silver pieces, and I'll put these in your hands in a minute. But over the centuries, the same size silver coin, the time of the Greeks, they called it a dram or a drachma. You may have heard the term. By the time of the Roman Empire, virtually the same size and weight coin in silver is called a denarius. In the Byzantine era, we call it a siliqua. It's starting to get a little smaller. Like in 1965, when we changed our American coins from having 90% silver content in it to having almost nothing. Very few coins actually had silver in them at that point after. Through the Crusader era, they were called deniers. And then in the modern era, they were called pennies. And every one of those coin types had a similar value in terms of how much it could buy, how much bread it would buy, how much drink it would buy, how much entertainment it would buy. 1 day's pay for one silver coin over that thousands of years time period. So let's start off with some coins. And I like to take coins that have biblical or scripture ties to them. So this particular coin, and by the way, when I hand the coin to Sam, I'll be talking about it on the screen. By the time it gets to you folks on that side, I'll be gone a little ways further. But I'm handing around a little piece of paper with every one of these, okay? And it has a little bit of information that might refresh your memory in terms of what we had talked about at the time. So the other thing is that I often get questions on how much are these worth. Okay, how much are these coins worth in the market? So I have a little sticker in the upper right-hand corner in yellow that has approximately what I'll call a market value on them today. Okay, so I do want to say if you have questions about anything that we're talking about, even if you have a coin later and you just have a burning question to ask about it, please feel free to ask, okay? Because I want to make sure you get what you're talking about here. So, there you go, Sam. And by the way, if you drop them, doesn't make any difference. These things have been around a long time, okay? So I do want to say I had a coin that had a beautiful image of Christ on it, and it was, it was one of my favorites. And I was doing a presentation at a university, and I had about 300 kids, students in the audience. And I heard the coin drop and hit and roll and drop and hit and roll from like ting, 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 ting. And I saw it later and had all kinds of marks on it. So that became the coin I used for a long time to hand out to folks. So, but my point is, don't worry about them.
Talk about shaving,
Say again?
the shaving of the coins.
Yeah, in fact, I'll show a coin a little later specifically addressing that, okay? And that's a good question. He's talking about shaving the coins. There's a reason for that. So, we have a coin here that I'm passing around, and it is a coin that it's got like a lump of silver, and it only has an image on one side. And the image is that of a running king. These coins almost always were some means of propaganda. So if you have an image of obviously a king, he's got a crown on his head, he's got a spear, and he's got a bow in his hand, and he's running. This is an aggressive image of my king, happens to be the king of the Persians at the time. This happens to be Artaxerxes. And that is a strong, bold icon form that happens to be the most important silver coin for hundreds of years at the time of ancient Persia. What do we know about the name Artaxerxes? If you go back into the Old Testament book of Nehemiah, you'll find that Nehemiah had a particular role. Nehemiah was the cupbearer for Artaxerxes. So he walked around behind him and held his cup, his drinking cup, right? Not exactly. However, they were very close friends. They were very engaged with each other because Nehemiah, at the time when kings were poisoned and entire communities were changed and countries were changed as a result of changes in leadership due to poisoning, Nehemiah would taste the wine and taste the food of the great king Artaxerxes, and they became friends. And in that friendship, Artaxerxes saw that Nehemiah was not feeling as though his people were doing as well as they should. And on the trek that the Jews had in going from Mesopotamia back to Jerusalem to rebuild the great city walls and gates of Jerusalem, they were not succeeding. And it was the families of Nehemiah that were attempting to do that rebuilding. It was Artaxerxes who wanted someone close to him that he could trust in Jerusalem, this most southern part of his area of reign. He said, Nehemiah, go and take these documents with you. One of these documents said, you can cut the wood from my forests. This other document says that you can cut the stone from my quarries. And overall, you have the right of passage throughout my lands safely. It was because of Artaxerxes that the great city of Jerusalem was rebuilt. The walls and gates of the great city that had been once torn completely down before the Jews were taken away to captivity, now is restored. This now is setting the stage from the 5th century BC to the rejuvenation of the Jewish culture and the renewal of the city of Jerusalem. So this is one of the few coins that is affordable. You can see it's not a lot of money for this coin when it gets around. They're available for $100 or $200. This would have been about 2 days' pay at the time, typically used for transactions, for soldiers, any kind of skilled labor. It would have been 2 days' pay for them. So the idea is this coin was around at the time of Nehemiah. One of the most commonly referred to ancient coins is called the widow's mite. And the widow's mite is arguably the most common coin of 2,000 years ago. So, both in Mark and in Luke, there's a Bible story that virtually every child that comes up to my presentations knows, and I'm sure most of you know it. I happen to like in Mark 12. It goes something like this. Christ and his followers go to the temple, and they witness people putting money in. And they talk about the fact that some people put great amounts in and made noise and made a show of putting and donating great amounts. And they saw people that were coming in and just gave, what was typically their weekly allowance. Then they noticed one elderly woman that came in, and she dug down and she didn't find. And she dug down a little deeper, and she finally found 2 small, insignificant bronze coins. And you'll see when this coin gets into your hands, if you drop it, you might lose it. It's so small. And Christ said that she had given more than all of the others because she gave from her want, not from her excess. And so the story of the widow's mite, the mite being the reference to being the smallest physical type of coin at the time of Christ. That's exactly what this coin is. This coin shows the Seleucid Empire's anchor, and then this is a symbol of the diadem. On a Jewish coin, we could not have what's known as a graven image. By Jewish law and tradition, you can't have an image of a living, breathing object. And so the symbol of power here is the Jewish king. And in fact, that inscription is in Paleo-Hebrew script, and it says, "Of Alexander King." On some of these, you can actually read the Greek language version of exactly the same inscription, "Of Alexander King." That's not Alexander the Great. It's Alexander Jannaeus, one of the last of the Hasmonean kings, the last of the great Jewish kings. And these coins, called a lepton, or the plural is called lepta. In 1st century Greek texts of Mark and Luke, the word lepta is actually what is stated. And so we know that this is the type of coin that was involved. And I hope when you get it, I want you to think, especially when you get one of these coins in your hands, if this is a passage that you remember as a child, as an adult, where you shared it with others, I want you to hold the coin, and I want you to know that this is what they were talking about. I want you to feel, and this is exactly how I personally think that you can be transported back to the time, back to the feeling, and have this great sense of the antiquity and depth of our faith. Herod the Great was an unusual, egomaniacal leader. He was not Jewish, but he ruled the Jews. And on his coins, it says, "Of Herod King." He still is not putting what the Romans at the time would have had the image of their own king on the coin. He's not putting any physical icon form, but what he's doing, this little thing that looks like kind of like an omega here, okay, that actually is, at the time, and I'm going to hand this coin to you, Sam. At the time, the rulers, when they were the king, they did not have something that, oh, I inadvertently hit the button. They did not have something that looked like a crown made of gold sitting on their head. Not like we see in medieval art. What they had was a strap of leather. And on that leather strap, they would have encrusted it with gold and different jewels. And then, Sam, I'm going to have you hold that for just a second for me. So, I've got this strap of leather, and it's highly visible to people. Maybe the sun glints off the stones, and I wrap it around my head, and I tie it in the back, and I pull it tight. And what happens is, went the wrong way, these little things right here are the things that are hanging down the ties of the diadem or crown. So this is the symbol of the crown. This is perceived to be the showbread table in the Holy of Holies in the ancient temple. In fact, on really good examples, and that is a really, really remarkably good quality example. I try to get good, so you can see how bad these things end up looking sometimes. Up on top of the table, oftentimes you'll find some of the offering bread, or the what would have been a part of the ritual shown on the table. And the 2 palms on either side not only indicate the denomination, this is a 2 pruta, give you an idea, that little widow's mite was